What if everything you thought you knew about sex, desire, and self-worth wasn't quite the whole story? This is The Reveal, a podcast about what happens when we ask better questions about the most intimate parts of being human. I'm Elle, certified sexologist and life coach. And every week I invite therapists, sexual health experts, wellness leaders, and cultural thinkers to help us explore the layered and often overlooked space where sexuality, identity, and emotional truth meet. These are conversations about how we heal, how we connect, and how we find real joy and relief in a world that doesn't always make either easy. Curious? So am I. This is The Reveal. Oh, and just a heads up, sometimes when I forget a word mid-sentence, I jokingly substitute it with the word vagina, even if it doesn't make sense. It's a habit, but honestly, it makes me laugh, and hopefully you too. Welcome to The Reveal. I'm your host, Elle Chase, and today we're diving into a topic that feels both radical and beautifully simple, the connection between joy and sex. We often think of sex as physical and joy as emotional, but what if the two are inseparable? What if cultivating a practice of pleasure could actually enhance joy in every corner of our lives? This conversation is about reclaiming sex as something more than performance or expectation. It's about presence, healing, play, and the radical act of choosing joy. To explore this, I'm joined by Dr. Mary Catherine McDonald, researcher and the voice behind the Joy Reset, 6 Ways Trauma Steals Your Happiness and How to Win It Back. Today, she's here to help us unpack why joy isn't just a fleeting feeling, but a practice, and how pleasure, especially sexual pleasure, can be one of its most powerful pathways. So let's get into it. Dr. Mary Catherine McDonald, or MC, as I call her, is a trauma researcher, author, and coach who helps people reframe trauma as a strength response and reconnect with joy. She's passionate about making healing accessible, grounded, and even a little bit fun. Yay! Welcome, MC. How are you?
I am good. I am so glad to be here. So thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited you're here. You're one of my favorite humans.
Oh, same. Right back at you.
Well, thank you. So we know you have the Joy Reset, and this is the book, the Joy Reset. For those who are watching this on Substack or YouTube, just got to see the cover of the book, and it's really it really did change my life. So I love the book so much. So I'm so glad that we get to talk about the book as it relates to sex too.
Yes.
So let's get into it. You mentioned that we often misunderstand what joy really is, that it's not just happiness or excitement. So how do you define joy, and how is it different from momentary pleasure or positivity?
So you probably know this about me, but people that don't know me won't know that one of my favorite hobbies is to redefine the terms, because I think that a lot of the terms that we use, especially from psychology out in the world, get really twisted and bent. And so I love to kind of go back to the origin of the word and think about how it might be redefined for better living. And in the Joy Reset, one of the things that I do, one of the main purposes of the book is to sort of take back these terms, joy, hope, optimism, because I think they've gotten a really strange reputation. They have turned into these like airy, flighty things that are only for these moments when you have happiness and ease and all this stuff. And the the it's actually a verb. Joy is something that we do. It's something that we take and render and share. It comes from the old French root enjoy, which means enjoy, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing because I don't speak French.
Sorry.
But it literally means to give joy, to rejoice. And I love that because it's really different from fleeting happiness, right? It's not, it can be a life practice. And I also think this is what I've seen in my own life, but also the lives of my clients, that joy is not this airy, flighty thing that's only available when you are healed and happy. It's actually really gritty and embodied and often really tiny. if you think about things like the first sip of coffee in the morning, or like the way the sunlight kind of sneaks across the wall, it's active and rebellious. It's not passive. It's not dependent on circumstances. So to kind of summarize all of that, I'm trying to take it out of the like live, laugh, love font and make it real.
Yes. Thank you for doing that, because
Yes.
I can't stand the live, love, laugh. But that is great. Thank you. And I was sort of thinking about joy and happiness and what I thought the difference was between them. And I sort of thought joy is a state of being. It's like a practice, and happiness is a feeling, more like a feeling that can pass, come and go, and wax and wane. And joy is more a state of being and a way to live. So,
I love that. I also think that like happiness gets very loaded. Like I knew this guy in college who would he was very sort of morose, but he would sort of walk around parties and kind of sidle up next to people and say like, "Are you happy?"
wow, that sounds very Gen X, I have to say.
Right?
Yeah.
But you'd be like, "Well, wow, like not anymore." Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Right. As soon as you try to pin it down, it becomes it sort of slips away. So I think joy feels a little bit more accessible.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do with groups is to kind of do a joy timeline where you think about life at 5 years old or life at 8, or around there, and think like, okay, what was the thing that gave you the most unbridled, ridiculous joy? And people always have an answer. It could have been their Power Wheel or their, the American Dolls, or whatever. And I think we get distanced from that as we grow up because we think we don't joy isn't for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And that sort of dovetails into my next question of a
Oh,
lot
good.
of
I was
people.
rambling.
Oh, no, no, it was great. Is that people, one of the ideas in your book is that joy doesn't have to be earned, right? So
Yes.
I mean, I have an idea, but I want to hear what you have to say. Why do so many of us unconsciously believe that we have to suffer before we deserve joy?
I think two main sources, and I'm super curious what you think too. I think the belief usually comes from trauma. And
Hmm.
so shame and guilt and hypervigilance convince us that we don't deserve joy, or that we can't access it in this moment. Maybe that's for other people. And I think many of us kind of internalize this idea that joy is frivolous. So if you're laughing, you're not being serious enough, true enough, and also that there is no laughing and suffering. So if you're going through a hard time, or if you're dealing with grief, like laughter is not available to you. But joy is not a reward that you unlock after suffering. It's a medicine that your nervous system needs to counter stress and survive the suffering.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh, I see that. I really do. And I can identify with it. And at the same time, I also think along with that is capitalism, you know? Like we are not allowed to vacation unless we have a certain number of days we've put in to work,
Right,
right? We're not
right,
allowed
right,
to
right.
rest. We're not allowed to nap. All of those things have sort of a pejorative connotation to it, you
Yes.
know?
And this is why I think joy is a rebellion, because
Yeah.
the instant, can I swear on here? I think so.
Oh, please. Fuck yeah.
Okay.
Please. I have mouth
Fuck
like a
yes.
sailor. Yes. Fuck yes.
Because my initial, as soon as you say that, I want to say like, fuck that. Like we have to take joy back, and we don't. Why are we subscribing to that mentality? The only thing it seems like to me the most appropriate thing to do with that right now is to counter it by actually bringing in more joy and figuring out how to fold it into your daily life, and not just reserve it for vacations, but also to say to that system that says you can't do this until you've done that, fuck that. Fuck that.
Yeah. Fuck that. Fuck that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. And there was another part of your book that I found really sort of revolutionary, because when you have something called the Joy Reset, you're probably thinking, oh, it's going to be a bunch of affirmations and, toxic positivity and all of that. And it's not. It's a dark book. And
Yeah.
and you talk a lot about experiencing joy alongside pain. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about that, as it will become relevant, I think, later on in the conversation.
Yeah. I think one of the things that has become most starkly apparent to me as I've thought about this, and also just as I've lived through my own life, is that joy will show up whether you want it to or not. I tell the story in the book about being at my father's funeral, which was by far the darkest moment I had had in my short 24 years. And really at the edge of darkness, right? Like almost couldn't walk, speak, that kind of thing. And walked up the aisle to to the front pew, which is where you sit when your father dies. And it had been my dad died on Christmas Day, and so it was obviously still Christmas season. We had his funeral; it was the 28th, and this was the church that we had belonged to my whole life. You know, the church I was going to walk down the aisle with my dad. Now we're walking him down the aisle, so this incredibly devastating moment that almost like language doesn't even capture. And we get to the front of the aisle, and I come face to face with a ginormous plastic painted camel because the church that year had decided to sort of go all out with their nativity scene instead of doing
Wow.
sort of the frosted glass tiny little version that was off to the left of the altar. They had this giant, plastic. It looked like a kind of lawn, like the lawn
Oh,
version.
God. Oh, my God.
But the craziest part about it was that my dad thought that like animatronic animals and talking animals on TV was like the funniest thing in the entire world. And so all of that absurdity just sort of came crashing into all of the devastation. And I spent the first probably 10 or 15 minutes of my father's funeral, like hysterically laughing,
Oh,
quietly, kind of into my, you know, handkerchief, pretending that it was tears.
my God.
And that was sort of my first experience with that. But I've also seen that with my clients. Like people, a lot of the time when they find out what I do, will say, like, oh my God, how do you sit in the darkness all day? And I say, a lot of the time we're laughing. This shit is absurd,
And
And there
also,
is,
yeah, laughing
yeah, yeah, yeah.
is a great way to break up the pain, so it's not
Yes,
so heavy for a
yes,
really long time. Dark
right,
humor. I never trust anyone without a visible dark side, and
right.
especially someone that can laugh and be dark at the same time.
Yes. You need to put that on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker. I love that. I never trust anyone without a visible dark side because it's true.
It's true. Like, we're human, let
Right,
us be
yeah, yeah.
human.
And humor is subversive, right? Back to this idea of like joy being rebellious. Like that is sometimes how we take the reins back when life has ripped them away from us. It's incredibly powerful.
It is. It is. And I was thinking too, when you write about joy as deeper than just fleeting happiness, and joy along pain, joy in all of its permutations that make it something that has more gravitas, I think, than happiness. I'm curious how you see pleasure fitting into that. How is pleasure a form of joy, and what happens in our lives, our brains, and our bodies when we actually make time for it?
I think there's a lot of ways we could define this and describe it, but I like to think about pleasure as a direct doorway to joy. So if joy can come from really deep and serious things, joy can come from grief, joy can come from depth, but it also can come from pleasure. And I think it's one of the most direct doorways into joy. If you feel pleasure, you're pretty instantly also feeling joy. And I think the reason that it's so important on the brain and body level is because pleasure floods the nervous system with all of the happy things that bring us up and also counter stress hormones. So dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. So all of this reduces stress hormones and also activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of the nervous system that's responsible for rest and digest. So I think when we treat pleasure like an afterthought, which we often do. It so neatly fits into this shame story of like, I can't have pleasure until I have worked, or I have to give myself a treat, but the treat only comes after a certain amount of suffering. I think we actually rob ourselves from, one of the simplest and most accessible tools for regulation and nervous system safety and healing. And when we actually value it and lean into it, and that could be sexual, it could be sensory, or just like daily delights, we actually reset our baseline for joy, which then in turn kind of re-regulates the whole system,
Wow.
right?
Yeah. Wow. So it rewires your brain into more sustainable sort of well-being, the more
Yep.
pleasure that you can, and pleasurable sex. I mean, we're talking about pleasurable sex during this
Right.
podcast, as a way to rewire your brain towards joy, as opposed
Yeah.
to stress and, God, I just feel like spreading my arms out and looking around the world like the
No, right.
dumpster fire that is the world right now.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I mean, is there a difference between this is there a difference between pleasure and joy? And how does one fuel the other? So there is a difference between joy and happiness.
Yeah.
Pleasure is less a is it more of a feeling like happiness, or is it more of a practice, or can it be both?
I think it's what happens to your nervous system when you feel safe enough to revel in something. And so you could have pleasure in a fleeting way, like you have happiness. And it might sort of, I'm thinking of like this image of if joy is sort of a circuit, it sits really kind of centrally, and you might have pleasure or happiness that comes in and sort of touches it and then kind of flies away. But if you learn to sort of imprint it and take it in, that's when you get that really exciting stuff about the nervous system, right? Like, so I think pleasure can be something because of the way that we categorize it and sort of judge ourselves and shame ourselves and tell us we don't deserve it. It can be something we experience but don't imprint.
Right.
Joy
It's
to me suggests that we're imprinting, we're taking it in and sort of
right.
and sort of reveling,
Yeah. So sort of like the difference between like okay sex and great sex.
Yeah.
There's
Yes.
there's that there's pleasure and joy, but there's even more joy in better sex, right? You get more benefits from it. But no, I mean, mess sex is fine too. But, sometimes you want a little, you want a little bit more. What can I say?
Right.
Uh,
And I think like sex is such, I've been thinking about this so much as we like approach this date to meet to talk about this, because like sex so similarly to joy is something that we can experience in this, like there's a huge spectrum of it, right? And you can experience it in this way that feels really, you can sort of load in there like shame and body image stuff and worry about performance, and you can have pleasure for a few minutes of that, but it's sort of crowded out by all of this other stuff, and then you're not really getting the full benefit of the joy, you know what I mean, because you're sort of grappling with all of these external things that are coming in and sort of interrupting guilt, right, all of these things.
yes, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but
No.
what is a gentle practice in that way of pleasure and reclaiming joy in those contexts?
In like specifically
When
sexually.
sexual shame, trauma, when you're in the moment and your mind is wandering and you're having all of these like, oh God, my cellulite, or oh, my shame, you know, is there a gentle practice to do in the moment to help reclaim joy?
Yes. I think this one of the other key things I tried to do in the book is to sort of redefine the calculus of joy. I think we get that calculus very wrong because we think if I've got a big bad thing, I need a big good thing to counter it. And so this is one of the reasons why we seek these huge life changing joys and we don't feel satisfied until we get to them, but then we get to them and we still don't feel satisfied, right? So we're setting ourselves up for failure. And so I think what is neurobiologically true is that it doesn't need to be a giant joy in order for it to be profoundly healing and rewiring for your nervous system. And so the task, I think, in general with joy is to scale way down and try to make it a sustainable daily practice. And so the thing that I'm doing on Instagram this year is this practice of tiny little joys, which is you find one tiny thing that gives you a little blast of joy and you imprint it online by writing it out or making a little video or taking a picture. And that's a way to really kind of get joy to land, but it's also a way to get your brain to start looking for it. And I think you can sort of make a parallel to that with sex. Sometimes I think we bite off too much and we try to say, like, okay, so my goal is to be completely open and connected and free for this entire encounter. And instead, it's like, could you notice and imprint the feel of a single caress that feels a little bit like electricity? Can you have one really deep, amazing kiss that feels just lights you up, right? Like, and imprint that and kind of celebrate that win afterwards with yourself or with your partner or partners. Like, just that moment was really hot and really exciting, and I'm going to think about that tomorrow. Like that's what I mean by imprinting. You kind of take it in and label it and sort of extend the savoring.
I
And
can
and so I think, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
No, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think we can do
Okay.
that in sexual encounters in a variety of ways and really change things without having to sort of recalibrate the entire encounter. I think the benefit is that over time, you will find yourself achieving that goal of being more connected and present. And, again, most of the time, like you said, meh, sex is fine. We don't always
Yeah,
have to have, the most connected, amazing sex.
ever. I
Yeah,
know.
right.
I was just thinking about that and thinking about what I'll tell my body image clients when they're in the moment and they're just thinking about their bodies. And first of all, I do the tiny little joys practice every day, and I've noticed a
Yay.
difference in
Yay.
because I notice things more. Like I'm like,
Right.
there's a tiny little joy. Oh, there's a tiny little joy.
Yes.
Um, so it makes it easier, like you were saying, to notice those in the moment. And so when they're in the moment and they're engaged sexually, to stop what they're thinking about their body is, how does that person's finger feel on my shoulder? How can I'm going to zero in on how great my thigh feels against their thigh. Those kinds of little things, because when you're in that moment and you're just thinking of all the things that are taking you out of the moment, to get right back in, that's your gateway. It's that little thing that you're enjoying so much, that little bit of pleasure, that little bit of, that little spark, like you were saying, will really bring it back. And that's really kind of no different than a daily practice, but it does make you notice it.
Right, right. And you could do that with yourself if your sexual encounter is solo, you could do it with a partner, you could do it with flirtation. Like, it's this whole horizon of experience. It doesn't have to be, this singular thing. And can we geek out on the brain stuff for a second?
Oh, please do. It's
Okay.
my favorite. Yes, please.
So the real thing that inspired me to write this book and really dive into this was the neuroscience, because I'm a huge nerd. But what researchers found in like 2015, and I frankly don't think people are talking about this enough because it's been 10 entire years, was that, so we know that fear inhibits joy, right? So when you're in a terrified moment or when you're really stressed in your life or at work, joy feels really inaccessible. And one of the reasons for that is because we can think about your brain in terms of like electrical circuits. The fear circuit takes a ton of electricity and power. And so when you're in fear, you don't have the resources you need to access joy. And we've known that forever. Anyone who's been afraid can feel that. But what researchers discovered in 2015 is that the opposite is also true. So joy actually inhibits and dampens fear. And so what that means is that if you take these daily practices into your life, every moment that you spend sort of in the hope circuit, which is what it's been termed by Martin Seligman and Stephen Meyer, you every moment that you're in the hope circuit, by definition, by default, the fear circuit is offline. And
Mm,
so, if you think about a realm of your life like sex, that can be really fucking scary and totally justifiably. And I think a lot of the time we spend in healing work, we think we have to do all of this cognitively and it has to be all serious.
right.
And part of it is cognitive, part of it is serious, of course. But I think we can also sort of bolster all of that work that we're doing and scaffold it by imprinting these little joys. Because if you can have 1 second in an encounter where you're in the hope circuit, you're feeling joy or pleasure, you are not feeling that fear. And the more you do that, the more you sort of crowd out that shame, that judgment, that worry, that disconnection, those trauma memories, whatever you're kind of coping with that's keeping you from staying connected.
Wow. Oh, that's science, man.
Isn't it cool?
Science for the win. Um, uh, do you still find that there are myths about sex and happiness and joy that you see people struggling with? Are there some that you see people struggling with most often and the clients you see? And you can say no too. But I find that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a performative part of sex that people feel sometimes that they will default to when they don't want to feel their feelings or they don't feel 100% in the moment. But I'm curious to know if you've noticed any.
Yes. There's like I have 100 thoughts. So I hope I make sense or some semblance of sense. But
You do make sense. So
thank you. I think one of the most common things that I see is this belief, and I think it's kind of an undercurrent belief. It's not necessarily one that people would notice themselves thinking, that you can't and shouldn't ever talk about sex. But
right.
I've seen clients who have been married 40 years and literally never had a conversation about sex, not once. And I think that's kind of held up by a couple of things. The belief that like talking about it isn't sexy, talking about it is impossible. This is just something we're supposed to know how to do well. And so if we don't, this is a statement of our relationship or our connection or my ability to perform or their ability to perform or whatever. And so I think often one of the very first steps that I take with clients is thinking about, can we open a channel to start talking about this? And often it can't even be a verbal channel. Like if it's too vulnerable and too scary. So it's like, can we have a text thread, an email chain, something where you're sort of opening the erotic channel and seeing what's in there for both of you individually, and then what can you sort of share. And then I think the other thing that comes up the most often, and this ties directly in with joy and pleasure, is that like it's supposed to be serious and can't be fun.
Right. You're not supposed
And
to
I think,
laugh.
right,
You're not supposed to laugh during sex, or, I tell people, I'm like, you're going to fart. You're going to
right,
put your hand on somebody's hair. You're going
yep,
to be taking pubic hair out of your teeth.
yeah,
I mean, there's a whole host of quasi embarrassing and also just silly things that happen. And if you can't laugh
yeah,
about it, I mean, come on.
yes.
Yeah.
Right. And I've seen so many clients when they'll come in and they'll say like, "Oh my God, we had this funny moment." And that was kind of more connecting than the actual sex,
Yeah.
because we were laughing about you pulled my hair or whatever, and the, so I think like this is clearly an area that we've taken like far too seriously. And if we could lighten up and bring some joy and play into it, then we could heal. And I think also part of this comes from, I see a lot of folks who are dealing with sexual trauma, which is incredibly, incredibly common and something we don't talk about enough. And when we do talk about it, I think we do a pretty bad job. And the idea that you could have joy in a physical encounter feels completely impossible. And so rewire, which of course makes sense given, a sexual trauma history. And so I think sometimes people are surprised by bringing in practices that relate to joy and just sort of sensual pleasure that isn't even sexual, right? Like, if can you experience that with food? Can you experience touch in a way that feels safe or silly, even, right? Because every time you're doing that, you're starting to rewire those things. we just take it too seriously, I guess. What do you see? What do you think is the most common?
Uh, I think the most common myth about cultivating joy or sensual embodied practices is that people don't think they're going to be able to do it. They think that they're already thinking a million things and they've come in for an issue or a problem or something that's bothering them. And when I give them things that sound somewhat simple, but I mean, it might be simple, but it's still hard to do, they're not sure that they'll be able to do it. And we're all totally capable. Like, an eye gazing exercise is very difficult. It is simple, eye gazing, but it is very difficult. I'll go, oh, I could never look at my partner in the eyes, and just gaze at them for a long time. And then you can sort of dig
Right.
into why, but you can do it. You really can.
Hmm.
You have
Hmm.
all the tools already in you to do it. And yes, communication, talking about sex is another big one. People just don't talk
Yeah.
about it, or they talk about it at the wrong time. They'll be in
Right.
bed,
Oh my
something
gosh.
will have
Yes.
happened, and it's like, oh, not the best time to talk about it,
Right.
not the
Right.
best
And
time.
not fun, right? Like you can talk about it
No,
in a way that's fun and exciting and sexy. It doesn't have to be like, in the aftermath, like let's break it down.
I know. And I guess, I was thinking about other types of exercises and practices that we could do, before being intimate, or if you're just starting to date and you're looking just to have fun for a little while
Mhm.
and explore pleasure more, like something is that reliably reconnects us to joy through pleasure, even if that's with ourselves, even if it's with someone we've known for 10 minutes or someone we've been with for 10 years. You know, are those are there things that we can do other than, cultivating that practice to sort of recapture? There might not be an answer, but I'm just looking for other practical things to do for people who are listening.
Yeah, I think I want to talk about resistance, but I'll
Yeah.
bracket that off. So remind me because I'm going to
Okay.
forget.
Okay.
But I think one of my favorite practices is called the absurd hope practice, which I completely made up. And it came exactly from this because I was working with clients and groups and people were running into exactly what you said a minute ago, which is I can't do that. I can't do that. Like that's
Yeah.
for other people. Like I can't
Yeah.
do that. And I was laughing when you were talking because I saw this TikTok the other day about someone. The thing was like a very realistic, scene from therapy, and then it cuts to this woman, and she's sitting on the couch, and then the therapist is in a chair, and then there's a chair in the corner, and the therapist says, "Okay, do you want to do the speaking to the empty chair exercise?" And the person goes, "Yeah, no."
No. That's what I used to say when I'd get the same thing. I'd be like, don't make me
100%.
talk to the chair.
Yeah.
Please don't make me talk to the fucking chair. Because I just can't get
Uh,
into it.
Absolutely the fuck not.
Yeah. Yes.
And I love that because it was hilarious, but also
Yeah.
it kind of hints at this idea of resistance. And I think the most important thing we can do with resistance is meet it when it comes up. And so one of the ways that I got around this, because I was, a lot of the exercises that exist about, cultivating hope and joy and imagination don't land for people who've ever had a trauma.
Right.
And that's most of us, right? Like,
Yep.
and so I think I tried to start kind of reworking some of these tools to make them more accessible to someone who is trying to find them in the middle of resistance. And so absurd hope is this exercise, positive psychology might ask you to imagine, where do you want to be in 5 years? Dream your most impossible dream. Where do you want to be in 10 years? Do you want to take a cruise? Do you want to own a
I
lake
can
house? Like
never do
whatever.
those. I can never do those. I can't.
Nobody can.
I can't do
Nobody
that. Yeah.
can. And so I was like, okay, what if we brought in a little bit of existential absurdity here and made it ridiculous? Could you spend 5 minutes dreaming about something absolutely impossible? Like that you're going to be an elephant in the ballet in Paris, and you're going to be right, like these
Yeah.
things that are incredibly detailed but not going to happen because you've made them absurd.
Right.
And the sort of the benefit is that you get the experience and the reverberation in your nervous system of dreaming. without running into the like, well, I can't go to Paris and I can't actually be a ballerina because I'm a size whatever. And, I stopped dancing when I was 4, all of this resistance that comes in and kind of cuts you off. And so I think all of that, very long winded way of saying,
No.
I think we could also do that with sex, right? So if you're in a period where you feel like you can't access joy and sex together, could you dream absurdly what that would look like? Right? Like, pick a celebrity, imagine in great detail what it would be like for you to meet them. This is not going to happen. And that gives you license to get more detailed than your fear would allow. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, it makes perfect sense because your brain already knows that it's absurd. So it's not attaching to that as a possible outcome. So you're
Right.
able to try out these different feelings in a way that your brain is just like, okay, you're daydreaming. This is just
Right.
ridiculous.
Cool.
So you're
Right.
not feeling that fear and therefore open
Right.
to joy and pleasure. Is that
Right.
right?
Yes, totally. And the cool thing is if you do it enough, like, so if you do that, a couple times a week or whatever, you will start to notice patterns that actually are things that you do want that your fear brain wasn't going to let you admit to yourself.
Interesting.
So I
I
wish,
love
can you
that.
think of like a super hot like scene? I wish I had like an example.
Oh God. That means I'd have to connect to my sensual self at the moment. Um, a super hot scene. Well, you know what? Actually, for me, the hottest scene ever is the scene in True Blood that started my whole journey, which is
Right, right.
when the main vampire and the ingenue get together finally and consummate their love. Yeah, I can think of hot scene.
Okay, so wait, if we go with that for a second, what's hot about it?
What's hot? Well, first of all, you can feel a chemistry.
Okay.
There's been a buildup.
Yeah.
And it's very intentional and very slow.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Love this.
Okay.
So it's a ridiculous scene, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a fictional thing and it involves vampires, right? So they
Right.
have all the trappings of like, this is not scary because it's fake.
Right.
But then you just gave 4 incredibly actionable things that you might want to include or communicate to your partner. I would really love this buildup. Can we figure out a way to include some sexual tension? Can
Yes.
we talk for 4 days before our next encounter? You know what I mean? Like, and so you can sort of tap into those things and figure out from the absurd what might actually be real.
Right. Gosh, I didn't look at it that way. I love
Little
learning
reverse
all this new
engineering.
stuff. Yeah, no kidding. You MacGyvered that. You MacGyvered that True Blood scene for me. Thank God. Oh,
I have to go watch it. I haven't seen it.
oh, it's so great. I think it's episode 5 or 6.
There we go.
I'll figure it out, and I'll text you or I'll email you.
Yes, I know what I'm doing at lunch.
Oh yeah, it's so hot, and it's not even like incredibly salacious. It's just super super duper hot. Well, thank you, MC.
Of course, this was
What a
so
great!
joyful.
It was so joyful, and
See
it
what
was
I did?
I see what you did. This is my tiny little joy today, or one of
Oh,
them.
yay.
I really, really am so grateful that you came on to talk about this, and I think there's a lot of content on here that people are going to find super helpful.
Oh,
So
yeah.
thank you.
Oh, of course. I'm so glad to hear that.
All
Yay. Thank you
right.
for having me. This was so fun.
My pleasure. And please come back at some point.
Oh my gosh. Anytime.
Okay. The
Okay.
Joy Reset, people. 6 Ways Trauma Steals Happiness and How to Win It Back by Mary Catherine McDonald, PhD. Dr. McDonald, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks for listening to The Reveal. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need it too. And if you'd like to stay connected, head to ellchase.com to join the mailing list for updates, the Substack version of The Reveal, and early access to new episodes. You can also follow The Reveal wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have a moment, leaving a review helps others find the show. Email for the show can be sent to therevealmail@gmail.com. And of course, if you're on the social medias, I'm at the Elle Chase on all platforms. Until next time, stay curious and remember, the most powerful stories are the ones we dare to tell.